1 o'clock. So we've got all those that are joining by Zoom are on board. So Bill, Nikki. I just can't see from my end.
Oh, we're here.
We're here.
I'm here.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, there's Nikki. And Bill?
Yep, yep.
Yep, okay. That's great. So we've got no apologies. First of all, I should say welcome everybody, and apologies I can't be in person. Once the date was shifted, I had already had a commitment, which being in Brisbane, so that's where I'm dialing in from. Right, moving next to declarations of conflicts of interest. Are there any that were unknown that need to be noted today? No? Okay. No. There are no matters lying on the table. There's been no public forum requests. We just need a motion, which I'll move, the confirmation of the agenda. Have I a seconder?
Yep, Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. Right, the next item is the confirmation of the public minutes of the last meeting, which was the 6th of July. Everyone happy with their minutes as they are presented?
Look, I do have an objection, but it's a general one rather than a specific one, and so it's not something I can deal with other than to just not approve them.
So you'll vote against the approval?
Yeah.
Okay. Rightio. Well, I'll move. You got a seconder?
Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. And then we've got an abstention. That's Nikki. So you voted against. You want that recorded?
That would be good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Rightio. I now invite acting CEO Stuart Burns to say some words about the recent events.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. So just through you, Mr. Chair, just wanting to acknowledge the fact that obviously since the agenda was prepared, there have been two significant events that have occurred in our district, and everyone will be well aware of what's happened. First being the issue with the compliance notice from Te Mata Arawai following the discovery of cryptosporidium and the illnesses that has caused in Queenstown. And secondly, not long after that, we had a state of emergency declared the 22nd of September as a result of the heavy rain event that we experienced and the subsequent landslides and debris flow on Ben Lomond. So obviously the reports that we've prepared don't include any, or the risk report that we've prepared doesn't include any commentary on either of those. Both matters are still ongoing, and our staff have been well involved with both. So you can expect some reporting in the future in the risk update reports, but at this point it's inappropriate to be discussing any potential issues of liability, and we'll be refraining from doing so until we've got a clear picture of what's transpired and why. So I'm happy to move on to Gareth's report if you are, Stuart.
Yes, and then Gareth's also joined by representatives from Aon, Dena and Matthew, and they'll also provide a brief update on the insurance market. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. With your permission, Chair, I would like to just give a brief overview of my report.
Yes, that'd be good.
Then if it is acceptable, I'll then ask the Aon team who are here to go through the sections of the report that they've helped us prepare in terms of the insurance market. Might make sense and be easier for the committee if you ask me questions in relation to the general report, and then possibly questions to Aon separately, and after that, if that is acceptable.
That's great. Yep, just carry on.
So this is a standard update report for the purpose of governance. It follows the same structure that I've presented to you in my role twice now. There's a couple of areas of consistency in terms of the way that we structure that report, and I'll take you through that. Happy to touch, obviously, on any specific items that you want me to answer questions to. So Section A of the report covers off where we're at with our risk management framework, and in that regards, we've made some real progress in terms of incorporating the Tier 1 risks that you endorsed at the last meeting into our risk register and also onto our dashboard. So we now have visibility of those across the organisation, which we didn't previously have, so a fairly significant step for us. We also have a regular risk strategy group. So we met yesterday. So obviously I haven't updated my report in terms of the outcomes there, but we did go through a number of what we term complex risks, really good conversations, and I will bring back that discussion for you in December. Item D, I'll skip over C for now, Chair, and touch on that last. Item D is in relation to our compliance obligations register. So the report identifies that we're due to get a register which includes all of our external legal obligations at some point in October. Can confirm that we have received that, so that's now with me to go through. And then I will be working with our executive leadership team around how we communicate that to the business. As the report outlines in Section E, we are intending to implement a compliance management system, and that will incorporate our external mandatory obligations, our external voluntary obligations, and our internal mandatory obligations. So this is the first start of us recording and having a good understanding of what our legal obligations look like and incorporating that into a compliance management system.
Yep. So Gareth, it's good that you've worked through Tier 1 and now well into the Tier 2s. And there's a number of those feeding into each of the categories. So there's been a lot of work, and there's still a lot of work in that regard. Absolutely, I agree. It's a lot of work to get to this point, and obviously going through that will be really useful for us as a business. Yes. Just one, I'll just preempt the insurance update. Just in the report I read where for the revaluation at year end, there was assets that were found and others deleted. And just knowing the Christchurch experience, those assets that were found that we didn't know we had, have they been added to our insurance register? So in preparation for our renewals, and we have two times of the year that we go through our renewals, so November and then again in April. We work with the business, principally property and obviously infrastructure, to ensure that the assets that are on our asset registers are consistent with what we have insurance for. So I suppose the simple answer is yes, if we've identified assets that are not there, we'll go through the process and make sure that they're included on our asset register for insurance. Yeah, great, thank you. I'll open it up now to, are there any questions around A, B, D and E that Gareth's been through?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just could you just remind us how big's your team now, because you're about to recruit another person, is that correct? That's right. Internal insurance lead. Sorry.
Yep, that's right. So we currently have 2 members of the team. So at the last meeting, and she sat at the back, I introduced Lucy Pennycook. So she's our risk and compliance advisor. So currently 2, soon to be 2.6.
2.6, okay. Yeah. So are we not talking about, you skipped over, did you? What item D, is it?
So through you, Chair, yes. With the Chair's permission, I'm going to talk to item C, and Aon will then be giving an overview of the insurance market, and then we'll go through questions.
Under just at page 20 there, risk strategy group, and you've got a heading, ineffective business processes. Can you just talk a bit more to that? What's that all in there trying to highlight there? Obviously ineffective business processes, but I've got a couple of questions on some of that paragraph 14. You got anything to say on that?
Through you, Chair, happy to respond to that. So, as the committee may remember, we took the committee through 32 tier 1 risks that we've incorporated into our risk register. The business process one is around how we manage the way that we deliver our services and functions. And obviously there is a risk if we're not clear around some of those ways of working, then we may not meet some of our strategy in terms of those objectives, KPIs and things like that. So that is the risk. As it says in the report, we have a business improvement team that was set up through an org review. So that's principally what they're working with on a priority basis across the business.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't know what some part of the, I'm trying to understand where to put it in. It was just a matter of managing the risk around. We're going to talk about it, I guess, in some of the more bigger projects and lessons learned, but the management of the contractors and the risk of getting into a complacent sort of use of consultants without the scrutiny. And I just wonder if that comes under this area of risk assessment or not. Or is that more of a management performance basis type thing?
Probably the latter.
Okay. Well, I can leave it if you like, but I'm trying to, it's a big agenda. I'm just trying to work out where some of these questions should come in. That's all.
Yeah, no, a good question, but probably in another forum.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry, so
Any other?
did you,
Yes.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I did have a question. I keep wanting to kind of bring this back to governance risk. And obviously there's some great work going on in the background, but for me it's still quite and intangible is the wrong word because it's never going to be tangible, but I don't understand how these frameworks and processes and policies are going to deliver, and in terms of, you know, what would councillors expect in a report when it comes to the, you know, the risk section of that report. How is it going to be different now that we've got this understanding of complex risk? So there's that, and then there's also the 3 lines of defence piece that's sitting in there that I'm really interested in from a governance perspective. So I guess where I'm heading with all this is a lot of questions, but I don't know that this is the forum. I think it would be really useful to have a workshop on this, because digging into it's not something we can really do in a meeting. So to understand it really well, I guess I'd like to foreshadow, in addition to the noting, that the committee recommend that that council holds a workshop with councillors on this stuff. So on what am I looking at? The risk framework and policy, the compliance policy, and the 3 lines of defence model, just so governance can have an understanding of what's going on and we can have an understanding of how that's going to flow through to what we see.
Yeah, good suggestion. Yep, I'd support that from this committee.
Thanks, Stuart.
And for the independents on the audit committee, if we could be invited as well, if we can make it.
That sounds perfect.
Okay, any further questions? If not, I'll hand over to our Aon representatives and they can take us through the insurance aspect.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start with an introduction around some other bits of work that we're doing in the insurance strategy space, if you're comfortable with that.
That'd be great.
So as we touched on earlier in one of the questions that I was asked, that one of the pieces of work that we're currently doing is developing an insurance strategy for the organisation for the purpose of our renewals. What Aon are going to talk to is the current environment. I'm sure everybody in the room is aware of the challenges in that space, and Aon, the team, will take us through what that looks like. One of the critical things that we've done and is outlined in the report is got a better understanding of any risks associated with some of our critical assets. So we had risk specialist out to have a look at 6 of our assets. They're outlined in the report, but in summary, our 2 wastewater treatment plants, our waste recovery and transfer stations, our underground car park at Church Street, and the last of those is QEC, so our event centre in Queenstown, obviously fairly critical assets for us. So we're still waiting for the report. I intend to bring that back in December, but just thought it'd be useful to touch on the fact that that information is really useful for us as we develop our insurance strategy. And the information will come back in time for us to consider that in preparation for November and again for our insurance premiums and renewal in April. If you're happy, I'll introduce the Aon team, Chair.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, just proceed.
So we have Deanna McDonald with us. We also have Matthew Wilson. I will ask them to explain where they fit in the Aon organisation, if that's okay. And they'll take us through principally paragraphs 27 and 36 of the report. They won't take you through line by line, if that's okay. They will just summarise what the report is sharing with us.
Thank you, Gareth. Kia ora, through the chair, councillors and senior management. I'm Deanna McDonald. I'm the National Client Relationship Manager with Aon's Local Government Risk Practice Group. Matthew is our National Manager for the local government. So just briefly, we'll run through at a high level about what we put into the report. We have currently in the market your material damage and infrastructure, so your below ground 3 water reticulation assets. And with those, they have been previously looked at predominantly on the earthquake, which has been your main risk, looking at the higher limits. However, the insurers are now looking more so at the weather events because they are the ones that are happening more frequently and tend to get more costly as they go throughout the year. So in the start of this year, we've had some significant weather events in New Zealand, obviously Cyclone Gabrielle and the Northland, Auckland and Coromandel flooding, and they have had impacts on the local markets. Now, the 6 main insurers in New Zealand are also owned offshore. So that's where we play into the global market, and they're looking into these weather events as being the ones that are affecting your bottom line. So with that, they're also looking at how your claims are, and that's on an individual council basis. We go to the market with yourselves for your 3 water reticulation as a collective with other South Island councils, but we go out to other markets, and it's New Zealand Inc. So there's other councils in the North Island as well as the South Island that we go up there with. We've got a long-term relationship with those markets, and they understand who you are and where you're at. With that, they will be looking at what it's going to cost them on the bottom line. And with the cost of claims, you've got inflation, you've got global supply chain issues, worker issues, those types of things affecting that. So they're taking all that into consideration, and where that leads to is the cost of reinsurance for them, which happens on the 1st of January. Now, this January just gone, it was anticipated it was going to be fairly challenging, and it was. We had a number of significant events last year that affected their bottom line, and that played through. So the reinsurers reinsure, the reinsurers reinsure on top of that. Okay. And we've been in what's considered a hard market for the past 6 years. So the cost has been incrementally going up every year. And we're anticipating that's going to continue. At the moment, we haven't seen any change. So you've got the rate applied to your value of assets that is increasing, and then the value of the assets themselves is increasing with inflation. So you've got a twofold effect there. Okay. I'll hand over to Matthew to explain next.
Just quickly before Matthew starts, Dina, the quantum of the insurable assets in New Zealand, and I'm involved in other things, there's a scarcity now in some areas. Do you see that being an issue with the QLDC in the future, where we can't get full insurance?
If I may, through the chair, to answer
Yes.
your question. Part of the approach that we take in terms of certainly under the infrastructure, in that there is the collective purchasing, that makes things more appetizing to the insurance market because they are spreading their risk across different geographic locations. Wellington is the standout example. Wellington is getting to the point very rapidly where there is probably not significant capital at an affordable price to maintain the values of insured and values of assets that need to be insured, but it is one geographic pinpoint. We're able to share that exposure across the country through the nature of the purchases for locations outside of Wellington.
Okay. Yeah, I'm aware of the Wellington situation. So that's, yeah.
Okay. If I may, I'll continue on to the sort of what can we do about this part of the conversation. So as Anna has alluded to, we're in a hard market. It's not going to get any better anytime soon. Global losses, New Zealand losses, they're all impacting the market. Part of the insurance strategy that we're talking and discussing with the team here is how do you mitigate the impacts of the market? Given that the market is always going to be what the market is, it is then how we interact with the market. Aon Act for, in one form or another, over 70 councils in New Zealand. We are acutely aware of affordability issues in the local government space of insurance programs. So what can we do? The conversation revolves around your risk appetite, your risk tolerance, what your balance sheet may look like, what are you prepared to not insure, what do you absolutely have to insure, and we are wanting to have conversations to move the purchase of insurance from transactional, as in we need one of those, two of those, one of those, to a more pointed strategic conversation, taking into account your risk exposures, your risk appetites. And insurance is ultimately a risk transfer mechanism. And in the hard market, we need to determine how much of that risk do we want to transfer and what are we prepared to pay to transfer that risk. So there's sort of two conversations that can take place. But to do that, you have to have a good, clear understanding of those positions. And I'm not suggesting that you don't, that is a generic comment, but it's organisations understanding what their appetite is, what their exposures are, how much do you need to buy, and at what level are you prepared to transfer or retain risk. And that is not mutually exclusive. There are some policies you may say, well, we actually want to transfer all of that risk. Other policies you may say, no, we're happy to absorb, maintain, carry a significantly different proportion of risk. Your biggest spend in terms of premiums is largely around three policies. That will be your material damage above ground assets, if we refer to it as that, your infrastructural assets, your reticulation assets, those sort of things. I'm ignoring Three Waters reform in this conversation. We're just looking at the status quo. And also your liabilities. So your public liability, professional indemnity, those sort of things. They historically tend to be for councils the three biggest spends. Asset selection is one thing you can do. Do we absolutely need to insure everything that we've got? Is there stuff that isn't mission critical or assets that are going to be removed, can be removed, don't need to be insured, those sort of things. And these are the conversations that we have. That's my summary of that part.
You know, thank you, Matthew. That was very informative. And that may form part of further discussions in the risk part that Nikki's talked about, the tolerance of councillors around the things that you've just spoken about.
It's got a question. Chair.
Yep.
Question, please, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you.
In the report, you were saying we're looking at an overall premium increase of between 25 to 30%. That's made up of the cost of cover and obviously the underlying asset value. Am I right to assume that's before we've done the strategic review and pick and chose? So that's like for like. And on that, am I right to also assume on that increase we'll be getting like the same cover, the same exclusions, the same, so everything that we've got to date. I'm still looking at a 25 to 30% increase like for like.
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, the yes is the answer to the first question. That piece of work is ongoing. The second question is for the infrastructure placement. We are currently waiting for the terms to come back from the markets. That's a 1 November renewal. We do not anticipate any material changes for this council in terms of excess levels, scope of cover, etc., etc. What, as a general comment, we have seen for some of the above ground material damage policies that have renewed 30 June is insurers wanting to apply a higher flood excess. They refer to them as pluvial and fluvial, so flooding caused by stormwater, rainwater, or flooding from rivers, etc. We are seeing some of those coming in. Your programme, the material damage is not for a wee while longer, so we won't know, but we can give updates as and when we know.
And if we do, or if and when we do go through this process of taking a more strategic strategy approach to our insurance cover, any ballpark as to what that may save us to still have, you know, what any other reasonable man would deem good insurance cover in place?
Again, through you, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
That's literally the $64,000 question. Simplistically put, your material, as Deanna said, your material damage, so your above ground policy, your material damage the premium is a function of total declared values having a rate percent applied to that. The rate percent to some extent is outside of our control. That's the market component. There are some things we can do. You reduce your total declared values because you've gone through an asset selection piece and you've decided we're going to take 50 million, 100 million, whatever it may be, out of that schedule. There will be a flow-on effect to premium. One of the other things you can look at, and again, this comes back to risk appetite, that rate percent. If you elect to change your current deductible threshold, you currently, there's a program deductible for non-natural disaster losses of $10,000. If you elect to move back to 100,000, 500,000, whatever it may be, absolutely on the understanding there has to be a cost benefit. But again, those sort of conversations will impact that rate percent. Therefore, that will flow into premium mitigations. I'm not going to say savings because the market's doing this, but mitigating the impacts of the market, yes.
Matthew, thank you for that. Just on the higher flood excesses, what sort of quantum are you seeing, just roughly, the change?
Sorry, depending on the geographic region, between 100,000 and 500,000.
Right, okay, thank you.
Through Mr. Chair, a couple of questions on the, just following on the three types of cover you talk about: material damage, infrastructure, and liability. So if we'll be making the assessments, I don't know whether we do it now or not. Claims we have done, what sort of claims have we made on infrastructure and material damage? Because there's some sort of infrastructure you think, I say it, stormwater, some of the stormwater systems, what are you insuring? Are you insuring the failure? Then also under the liabilities, and one of their biggest hits seems to have been liability to escalation of costs, developers agreements and things like that. Do we get insured on those sort of things under liability or not?
Yeah, sorry. Again, through the chair. Can I deal with that in two parts?
Yeah, sure.
Infrastructure. To be honest with you, I wouldn't know what claims history is for yourselves without going to look at it. I don't believe there has been any. However, the infrastructure programme in the current status quo is you are insuring your 40% because there is currently central government money available for 60%. So we're talking reticulation assets, et cetera, et cetera. And the premiums you pay are based on that 40%. That policy is the catastrophe policy. That policy is the earthquake coming through, the major event coming through, wiping out. We had quite a lot of conversations with Mark Baker and sort of do the analysis on some of this stuff. So that is a catastrophe cover. Okay, absolutely. Yeah. The material damage and business interruption, that is more of a all perils. So that's, you know, if you have a fire somewhere or a breaking or a theft or your buildings, locations, contents, libraries, whatever it may be. That is more of a, I've forgotten the word I'm looking for, a frequency loss event, but they tend to be lower values. One of the pieces of work that colleagues of ours are doing at the moment is something called as-if modelling. What would your claims history have been over the last 10 years, 5 years, if your deductible had increased from X to Y? How much is it going to cost you? What are the savings? Your liability question, and I'm not going to go into chapter and verse, but simply put, your public liability policy provides cover for damage to third-party persons or property in the event of you being negligent. Your professional indemnity policy provides cover for financial loss incurred by a third party if through your professional advice you have been negligent. So there's a subtle distinction there, but that's what they're there for. As a general comment in the council sector, it's predominantly building consenting issues that cause
issues.
Yeah, I think a second question, sorry, an additional part to your question was the contractor involvement in.
Yeah, well, where big hits lately, okay, for example, escalation on a big project, the road coming in here. We were talking about later another issue with the developers agreement, our liability we can impose here. Do we insure, or is there ability to insure against any of that? No, not directly. Not directly.
We can, as has been said, they're more to cover the losses that we've caused to others through our actions or lack of action.
Okay. Right, thank you. Thank you.
Are there any further questions?
Nikki's got one.
Thanks.
Nikki.
Yeah, look, some of those questions were answered, so I've just got one, and it's just around how this is, it's probably for Gareth, how it's flowing through to our planning department and the other parts of our organisation, because obviously we've got a plan change variation out at the moment, looking at intensifying, and a lot of that is in our old centres, which, you know, are in hazard zones according to the ORC's maps. They're prone to flooding, and there's some liquefaction risk. So how is this understanding of increased insurance costs flowing into the way we think about planning our spaces?
Through you, Chair, I'm happy to address the question. Let me know if it doesn't cover off what you were looking for. There's probably two connected pieces of work that might be of relevance here. So we have done the work to understand our risks across the organisation. That's an ongoing piece of work. Obviously, we'll update you on that in December. So part of that evaluation is determine what risks are relevant in the planning and development space. So some of the things that you touched on are incorporated into our risk register, and we're going through the process of understanding where they sit. So things like the implications of intensification are things that we would have and have considered through that process. In terms of how that's connected to insurance, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I can answer that question, Nikki. If the question is simply around whether planning and development are aware of escalation in insurance premiums, I've not had that conversation, but I expect more broadly they would be.
Right. So I guess my point is that if we're understanding these complex risks, I just want to be sure from a governance perspective that the cost of building in certain places is then flowing through to the people that are writing up the policies and deciding where we grow, because obviously if we need to put bigger pipes in, they become more expensive to insure and so on and so forth. So just, is that risk being communicated and being addressed rather than sitting in sort of this silo of, risk understanding, but not being utilised.
Through you, Chair, can I just add one other comment? It could be useful. And that's around the work that we're doing in terms of risk interconnectedness. So we touched on that last time. I am sure that when we've gone through that process and that work is currently in train, we will have a better understanding in terms of how risks that sit in one part of the organisation are connected to and dependent on risks in others. So as Matthew said earlier, our insurance strategy is around transferring risks, and we've gone through the exercise of connecting all of our insurance cover to risks in our risk register. And also we're going through the process of identifying linkages between what we've endorsed or what you've endorsed as tier 1 risks and our almost 400 tier 2 risks that we have. So we're not through that process yet, so I don't want to imply that that's complete. But I think when we do get through that process, we'll be in a much better position to understand how all of these things fit together and are able to respond, I suppose, to that with a much greater level of maturity.
Okay, look, that's great, and I'm sure we can always pay more to cover things. I guess my concern is going to where Stuart went at one point, where will we be able to get full cover? So do we intensify in places where we may not have full cover in future? And I think that's a massive risk that we need to be thinking about. Thanks.
Thank you, Nikki. Are there any further questions?
Yes, Stuart.
Yes,
Stuart.
Yeah, Bill. Yep.
Yep. I think support the idea of the risk workshop. When it comes to insurance, most large organisations with a significant number of assets are actually going through a process of working out whether they actually, in effect, self-insure or pay in excess based on claims history and that sort of thing. So I think when risk workshop is run, I think going through and testing the council's risk appetite around things that it might insure, not insure, or partially insure, or could club insure going forward would be a relevant consideration.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Thank you, Bill. Any other questions?
One other, please.
Lisa?
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, Lisa. Yes.
Probably just circling back a little bit to that. I noticed last week there was a national policy statement for natural hazards released quite quietly by government, looking at and out for consultation on having to take that direction around preventing development in areas exposed to natural hazards, where Nikki came from as well. So probably just looking at understanding our timeline towards input to that consultation and reading into that government feel around, are we going to have future provision for buyouts, or are we looking to make submissions towards that, and would that be our risk strategy group that would respond to something like that, Gareth? Or?
Through you, Chair, that's not necessarily something that the risk strategy group might consider. We have an internal policy team that will look at any changes in terms of external implications on us from things like changes in national requirements for us to consider. We're also, and it's mentioned in my paper, going through the process of understanding what a compliance management system looks like. So from a risk perspective, we certainly would consider the implications of those changes and implications of obligations through legislation. I don't know if that answers your question, but if it needed to be and was considered to be at a level that required input from a strategy group, then that is possible, but we probably wouldn't pick that up necessarily as one that we would look at, because it's quite clearly defined and able to be managed directly by the policy team.
I suppose
Yeah.
my question, sorry, Stuart, just around how quickly are we required to respond to these types of things? Like, how quickly would you see that affect the markets and things like that, if we've got government starting to ask for us to make these considerations? Is this like a do we expect like a 5-year lead time into these things, a couple of years, 10 years? I don't know.
$64,000 question.
Yeah,
Another
that's
one.
right. Lisa, I think that the big part of that is where you see developers that put pressure on councils. And in the end, when we're talking about transferring risk, developers have transferred risk to councils around these issues. So it is a big issue.
We might need to look at our vesting policy.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, any further questions? If not, can I have someone move the noting of the contents of the report? Nikki, you happy to do that?
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy to move noting the contents, but I also wanted to add, obviously, that recommendation that we hold a workshop covering. I guess we could simplify it and talk about everything that we've had in this item, or we could just, I can list it out. So recommend that officers hold a workshop covering the compliance framework and policy, the risk framework and policy, and the 3 lines of defence model, and recommend that members of the AFRC and councillors are invited to that workshop.
Yep, happy with that. So Nikki's moved it on, and then we're also undertaking to have the workshop around the risk compliance and the things we've discussed today. So we've got a second, Bill?
Yeah, with second, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Gareth, and also to Dina and Matthew.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, moving to sensitive expenditure, we've got Paddy.
So afternoon all. So sensitive expenditure is the next agenda item. Paper is for noting, it's taken as read. Just as part of the review for this period, we've not identified any major discrepancies to highlight. Just haven't taken any questions.
Open for questions. No questions?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
I have one. And look, it's just around RCP and the continued involvement with Lakeview. I'm just wondering, you know, how long does that continue? I guess.
Sorry, what was the question?
What was the question, Nikki?
It possibly needs to be, I could probably mention it in Lakeview. It's just I became aware of the level of expenditure that we've got on RCP with respect to the Lakeview project.
Well, maybe raise that in the
raise that
section.
in the later one. That's fine.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions around sensitive expenditure?
Oh, Mr. Chair, through the Chair, just
Yes.
I'm advised we received so many gifts. What sort of things are we getting? I never mind.
Pretty small stock, that's a bottle of wine.
Okay. So, yeah, and so the attachment B, Mr. Chair, that's just the contracts let in that month or 2 months, May to June. Is that? Yeah,
for this reporting period over 50k.
Oh, over 50k. Right.
It's over 50, yes.
Okay. It's interesting in the what is it, attachment C? Yeah, there's a couple of funny things jumped up there. I didn't understand what they were. On page 38, what's the shot over bridge, River Bridge AP duplication? What does that mean?
That is just the title of the actual project. So.
Oh, okay. So it's just a project we've got going on the shot over bridge.
Yeah.
No, here one. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? If not, can I have someone move the noting of the contents of the report? Lyle, are you happy to do that?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Happy to second.
Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Thank you. Moving to health and safety and wellbeing. So we've got Alan and Katie Church join for that presentation.
Mr. Chair, everyone, so we then take the reports as read. If you've got any questions, but
Okay, open it up for questions. Contractors. They seem to be, that's where a lot of our issues are still.
Question please, Mr. Chair. Hey. Thanks, Stu. Just a quick question. So there's a comment there about still having some staff vacancies or staff leave for COVID and things like that. What's the leave policy around COVID now? Is that sick leave? Is that unpaid leave? Or so how do you deal with it? Just paid as general?
Through the chair.
Yes.
And so thank you for the question, Heath. So with the COVID, the rules changed on the 15th of August. So people can still take sick leave if they have COVID. Some people are in a position, if they're feeling well enough, they're able to work from home as well. So that's still an option. But yes, sick leave that people may take.
And when they exhaust all their sick leave, if it's an extended period, for example?
So we have a really good, robust system in place to make sure that people's well-being is taken care of. So we liaise with the employee, the line manager, and potentially if negative sick leave is required, that's what we will do.
Question, please.
Yes, so Kirsty, oh, sorry, is that Lisa?
It is, thank you.
Yep, go ahead, Lisa.
I've been looking at the screen on the camera, thank you. Yes, thank you. Question, I suppose this one is around our staff wellbeing piece, and I note the great work of Jenny Stewart and others in your team. Thanks for addressing that. I suppose just seen escalating public friction in a lot of the topics that we're engaging on from a public consultation point of view, and in particular witnessed quite a few, or two specific cases of members of the community telling our staff that they were suicidal or really at mental risk through council business or decisions, and our staff having to engage at that level and provide mental health first aid on the spot sometimes, or keep themselves safe, and some more frisky public engagement sessions, one might say. So I guess I'm curious around the training and support that we put in around handling more aggressive crowds. I know some of our engagement practices are changing a little bit with drop-ins over town hall sessions, and that's creating some community pushback as to why are we not as available as we used to be. I think we're kind of, I don't quite know how to address it, with giving the reassurance to our communities that we're still available while providing a really safe place for our staff to engage up front. So I'm just curious how we support our team through that, what training, and can elected members go on this health and safety training of how to handle our public when they get a bit frisky. It's quite a collection of pitchforks this way, but
Through the chair.
Yes.
Thank you. Excellent points raised, Lisa. And I also share the same concerns as you. I definitely have seen an escalation as well. Something that we're working on, we've got an extensive program of professional development relating to this area. We also have our security protocols that Alan has been working very hard on collaboratively across the organisation. So that will be ready to be rolled out towards the end of this calendar year and throughout next year as well. So we're actively working in this area. As for elected members training, I will refer to Niall, and we will obviously speak about that outside of this as well, but there is opportunity. And I think we've got a lot of wellbeing support in place, and we have the EAP as well. So we're very active in this area. So be assured, we take this really seriously, the wellbeing, welfare, and how our employees engage with the public, but also making sure that the public have contact with our employees in a safe, wellbeing way.
I suppose I wondered about almost a debrief form following an engagement session where we could filter back lessons learned or just things to feed into the next one. We're just constantly evaluating where our safety points are. Yeah.
I think that's a good area that we could look into to formalise the debriefing. We do that informally anyway. So thank you for that comment.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Just Kirsty, I've got a question just around contractor incidents. They seem to be spiking.
Page 54 or 43.
Certainly. So, Mr. Chair, regarding the contractor incidents, we manage that very closely, and as it's pointed out in the report, that is one of our high risk areas. So we have the contractor management program that Alan's been working very hard on, and we had the initial introduction to that actually this week. Really good. And we have the rollout of the training formally happening in November as well.
Great. Okay, any further questions of Kirsty? If not, I'll move the noting of the contents of the Health and Safety and Wellbeing report. Got a seconder?
Bill, I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Bill. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. And thank you, Kirsty. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Right, we've got climate and biodiversity plan update next. So we've got Bill and Kirsty.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou katoa, committee members. So it's our pleasure once again to provide this quarterly update on the progress of actions within the Queenstown Lakes Climate and Biodiversity Plan. The report is structured across the 6 outcomes that we have in the plan. Provides a summary update on some of the key activity that has been happening since the last Audit, Finance and Risk Committee meeting. There are a couple of things I just want to note, particularly the progress that has been made under outcome 1 with regards to the ambitious leadership of Council in terms of climate and biodiversity. A major piece of work has been signed off in the last period relating to looking at the embodied emissions within our capital works program. We have attached the report of that, which is a piece of work done by Mott McDonald in conjunction with LG Equip. I note that we have run a council workshop on this, so many of you will have seen the detail of that piece of work, but there is an attachment, and happy to take questions on that if there are from the other committee members. But I will take the report as read and open up for any questions.
Yeah, Bill, it's an extensive report and it was good reading, so thank you. Are there any questions from members?
Mr. Chair, the carbon report, that's attached to this, isn't it? Oh, yeah.
Yes, the carbon, yep.
I was just looking ahead to, and we're coming into it later on, the QLDC's report, and a lot of things we're reporting against. Will the carbon aspect of projects be eventually reported in our annual report alongside? So we've got the financial side of it and all that sort of thing, but we're going to be starting to get accurate indications of the carbon impact of a project. Will that be reported in the annual report?
Through the chair, happy to ask. Very good question, Lyle. Look, that is a potential pathway that we are looking to go down. We have a significant project called the Project TILE, which is looking at embedding climate and biodiversity considerations in council decision making. One of the key areas of decision making, obviously, with capital works, and the reports and the piece of work that we've had with Mott McDonald enables us to start assessing the embodied emissions associated with projects. Which then allows us to track that through, I guess, the life cycle of that investment.
Yeah.
Things that are still at a very early stage, I think, within infrastructure as we look to assess the level of emissions and start to understand the consequences of those decisions. But we are enabling a framework to support that decision making, and the reporting that comes out of that can be developed and shared through to early communities.
And so one more question, sorry, it's down on the noise, but at paragraph 50, you're doing a local Indigenous ecosystems study, and you've got 2 consultants, wildlands consultants and Southern Lakes Sanctuary. I've heard of Southern Lakes Sanctuary. Do you know much about wildlands consultants? Obviously, you've engaged them. But
I will, through the chair, I'll answer the question, but I'll also defer to Kirsty a little bit as we go through. But that particular project is a collaboration with the Southern Lakes Sanctuary, who are a well-established local organisation who are looking to at the vision of a predator-free district. So they are working in a very collaborative fashion with a number of other local biodiversity restoration and predator trapping groups. Now, through the Southern Lakes Sanctuary, we have engaged with Wildlands, who are based out of Dunedin. They have a very sound reputation. They have done a significant amount of work in this district. And that piece of work will uplift information relating to, I guess, the optimal areas for planting, for fauna, as well as for looking at reintroduction of species on a GIS type platform. So there are already some existing data that we are leveraging and pulling together. But that will be a tool that can be used to support the decision making around where activity occurs in the district with regards to reforestation activity or ongoing predator control or species reintroduction. So it's a bit of it's a novel piece of work. We are in the stages of just starting to see how it's all coming together. But the intent is that for that is to be a tool that QLDC will host and make available to those groups to support with the activities that they are undertaking.
Okay, that's right. And just to remind me, we just had a session earlier on the economic diversification plan and understanding collaboration between groups there. Just to remind me, all these actions here, so we're not funding all this, or some of these other groups funding some of these activities. I just don't understand how it all fits in our budget.
Yeah, through the chair, we have a discrete, I guess, climate biodiversity budget line, which we're very thankful to have. And so we look at where we can make the impact investment for that.
Yeah, the best impact, yeah.
Yeah, so for some projects, they are almost like a catalyst activity to get the ball rolling with regards to some areas of activity. We have supported with some funding of specific field projects where we know there's a real impact associated with those. But increasingly, we know the funding challenge, particularly in that biodiversity conservation space. We are not equipped to fund that gap, but we are supporting those organisations as best we can to help look at those alternative funding pathways.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you for that. Any further questions?
Just one from me, really. And look, there's so much to talk about in there. Thanks, Bill. It's really comprehensive, and Kirsty. Look, I just keep coming back to sort of to what Lyle said about, we're not reporting on it in our annual plan, and then when we're looking at our long-term planning process, it didn't form in the background part of that baseline achieving our targets. So I just wonder, because this is audit finance and risk, what is the risk of not making achievement of those targets part of our baseline core work that has to be done, rather than leaving it in the sort of other space where everybody's grabbing for a bit of the funding? Sorry, too tricky a question. It's
through the chair, I can offer just some commentary, Nick. It's obviously a big question, but I will note that within the LTP discussions, there is a prioritisation around the emissions reduction, which I'm pleased to see. But I very much appreciate the competing challenges and constraints that are associated with that process. But we are looking, as we said, around both embodied carbon in terms of understanding and building maturity around that, so it can influence ultimately the decisions we make. But the operational carbon of council is also being looked at. Now, that's what we get assessed by Toitu. That's part of that accreditation process. That's where the targets have really been set around the reduction of the operational carbon. And certainly we are looking at those projects that can support those achievement of those targets, and doing our best to support the delivery of those.
Yeah, but Bill, there's going to be mandatory reporting, so we'll be part of that regime.
Yeah, and through the chair, the reporting of our emissions profile is now well advanced with Toitu's certification. That is a carbon reduced certification, I'll just remind you. So it is looking at our annual emissions, operational emissions, but it is also tied into the achievement of the reduction targets. So over a period of time, Toitu will be looking at us through a third-party lens to ensure that we are achieving those reduction targets that we have set.
That's great. And just one more, just on the report, it's on page 124, but it sort of mentions, next steps, eventually going beyond capital carbon and starting to think about, sorry, I just lost my page, you know, for example, something like the MRF or, you know, Wasteman projects or dealing with organics, maybe high in capital carbon because it might be built. We haven't got to that point yet where we're also considering the implications on, you know, reduction of carbon across the district. Are we planning on getting to that point at a specific time where we can sort of prioritize the things that reduce based on a bang for buck kind of process?
Happy to answer again through the chair. Look, I am confident that we are looking at tool sets that will help to give a balanced view of the benefits associated with those types of projects. So one such tool is a climate impact assessment, which would look at both the positive benefits that flow from emissions reduction, enabled kind of benefits that can be achieved through active travel, for example, that's associated with the project that also has an embodied carbon, I guess, footprint to it. So it is a nuanced discussion as you look at them. You know, not all investment is bad. There are benefits that flow through from some of these key capital projects. And so it's an evolving field, but there are some tools that are now available on the market that we are looking at as part of the project TIO, which is again that's
okay, cool. Yeah,
that's embedding it into the decision-making of council.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's on file over there on page 124, 125. That carbon management hierarchy is something we should have in front of us when we're doing the LTI.
Yeah.
It's a very simple diagram, but it actually focuses you on those 4 key things, how you can address carbon.
Yep, exactly.
One more question, please.
Yes, Lisa.
Chairman, if I may. Thank you, Stuart. My question's around sort of action 4.7 of your report, the food network resilience. And I'm just curious as to some of the risks that are increasing for us as far as our partners in different areas losing funding around that circular accommodations. If we look at Kiwi Harvest and different organisations where we perhaps had this ability for them to pick up some of the holes and channel food into some of the more needy parts of our community, being at risk, and also just some feedback around how we really are building that national, the key stakeholder resilience communication channels. I note that with the recent water situation, we had some feedback from our supply chains that even with 3 hours notice, they could have had water coming in quicker if we'd let them sort of anticipate some of these scenario planning situations. So my long-winded question is, have we got any plan to perhaps find other sources for them, plug the gaps, improve on those areas around our food resilience?
Through the chair, very good question, Lisa. I'll answer it in 2 parts as best I can. Firstly, relating to the development of a local food resilience network, so which is Action 4.7. Look, we're very much aware of how critical an issue this is. The work that has been done to date to assess the vulnerabilities, I think, is really novel. It's opened up a whole lot of positive feedback from those that have seen the report that we are working on in conjunction with Wanaka on. It has identified these areas of that food system that are very, very vital to ensuring that we can cope with disruption. Kiwi Harvest are, in terms of food recovery, they play a vital role, I think, in terms of enabling this, that circular response to, the food system. So we have been in an active conversation with Gary and the team. We're supporting certainly with their intent to find new sites and to look at funding opportunities for them. There's still some active conversation happening with them around the role they can play in an emergency food charter, because having that food resource, having the expertise to know how to access food that is available and then provide it as effectively and efficiently as possible to those who need it, that's a real vital area of knowledge. So we're looking to collaborate with Gary and the team to understand how we can support them to make sure that they do stay as a viable entity. The bigger question relating to, I guess, sector communication, again, we have multiple sectors in the district that relate to the service and provision of key services. Now, the food and the fast-moving consumer goods is one of them, and I suspect when you're asking the question, it relates into perhaps the supermarket sectors and understanding how they could, quickly respond to these events. What I will say is that we have established sector groups across key areas: tourism, health. We are building out some of the capability around particularly the engineering and consultancy side of things. But the food system and the supermarkets, they're also a vital part of that. So a sector group relating to them is what we're looking at with the Food Resilience Network, and ensuring therefore that communication pathways to share the most timely information around what's going on and accessing, I guess, their support and resources in a timely fashion. That's a key opportunity that those relationships can enable. So so at the moment there is a lot of relationship building, and I think although we do see some disconnect sometimes in the communication going out as quickly as we want, I think the relationships are holding well, and we are learning as we go about where to plug those gaps.
Great, thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thank you for that, Bill. Any further questions? If not, can I have someone move to note the contents of the report?
I'll move, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks, Lyle. Seconder, Lisa, all those in favour?
Aye.
Carried, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Bill. Yes, some good work there. Right, moving to Lakeview update. So we've got Paul joining us for that.
Hello.
This is an update for this committee.
Yeah, Stu, Mr. Chair, if I probably just run through some changes to the format, or not changes to the format, but variations on last month's report, or the last report. So there's been some additions, paragraph 19 to 21 around the council works program, talking about the completion dates and a development agreement variation. Also, we've accordingly updated tables 1 and 2 in the body of the report, and attachment C, table 1 to 2, around the decisions of the CE delegation there. With the changes to the template and the work that Gareth's team have been doing around risk, we've just changed the definition of risk there on paragraph 25. It's talking about the tier 1 risk, which is more around governance, which is probably appropriate for this report. And the financial tables has been an update there as well, just with progress on the infrastructure works, but otherwise happy to take questions.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Paul. I'll open it up now to questions.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just want to remind me though, with the schedule and table there, when is the transfer of funds to council for stage 1 after settlement conditions? Is that, you say 20 months after end of the year, is it? So we're talking about
So you're talking about table 2?
yeah, it's got their satisfaction of stage 1 settlement conditions milestone.
Yeah, correct. So before the developer can commence their works, they obviously need to settle with us.
Yes.
At the moment, based on their program, that's expected to be around June of next year. So within this current financial year. That's a projected milestone date. There is a sunset date, however, which is 20 months beyond our council completion date. So all I'm identifying there is if the developer is delayed in any way for any reason, they have a sunset date which they must settle with us, which is 20 months after our council completion date, which would be beyond June of next year.
Yeah, so 30th of September is the completion date, is that right?
So we're about 2-3 months behind on that. So
we're looking at
that.
So it's all moved out, that's right.
Yeah, so we're looking at around December of this year rather than September.
So 20 months will take us into 2025. to that?
That's if they wanted to push it to that
Okay.
area, but the developer hasn't at all signalled that. In fact,
But what I'm trying to get back to is that that's the earliest we get money transferred for that stage 1 to council.
if the developer's ready to go, as I've said, like in June, and they want to get started, they'll have to settle with us.
Okay.
So well, that's when we.
That's when the transfer.
Yeah. All I'm saying is there is a sum.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay.
So if they wanted to extend beyond that, but they have not indicated at all that they want to extend anywhere near that.
Okay. So just on that, I don't know how it financially affects what you've what we've got in the program budgeting wise, expectations on getting funding. How does that impact on?
Well, the initial assumption was we could receive it this year, 23-24. But it slips to 24-25, and as long as we get it.
Okay, so you might have to adjust your expectations on that.
It's just timing.
And is there an impact on the amount of interest we pay on, I suppose there is too?
Oh, there is, but some should talk
Yes,
about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, further questions?
Yeah, I've just got a couple if that's
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
Thanks. One's just very practical. How did the stormwater system perform up there? And I've got no idea. I'm just interested in, I just have concerns ongoing about the amount of water coming off that hill and what we're putting in there, how close to the bottom of it. So just interested in how it's performing.
Yeah, I texted the contractor that morning, and there were no issues on the site.
That's awesome. Sorry, I just think my battery's about to run out. I can ask for an update on the amount spent later. I just think it'd be really useful to have some more detail on the financials, but I can ask for that elsewhere. Just in terms of the reporting, there was just one thing I thought needed to be mentioned around the super profits, which wasn't in there, and I don't know if I'm able to mention it or not, which is around what happens if they make a loss in one stage and then the ongoing effects of that in terms of super profits, which sort of isn't detailed in the report. And I don't, look, it's not an issue, but I just think for next time it would be really helpful if it was really clear how that profit share payment is going to work and the issues that may occur if there's a loss in one stage.
So what you're saying is is it compounding? So does
yeah,
the impact
well,
on
yeah,
one
and I'm not
stage
sure what I'm allowed.
impact on it?
I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say based on, I mean, there's an awful lot of the DA is very clear for the public now, but I'm not sure that I can share stuff that's not.
Okay, well, I'll leave that for you to raise that in the appropriate forum.
Useful for next time. And the only other thing was just reporting the financials on it. It would be really useful to understand how Bill and Stuart feel about, and Heath, feel about present value versus current values and how those things, because they can get confused. Obviously, we've spent a whole lot of money up front and the payments are coming in over time, and yet we seem to be representing the money that's coming in just as a nominal value rather than a present value, taking into account that we're not going to get it for some time. So how would the committee like that presented? I guess is the question. Sorry, I'm just going to have to plug myself in.
Yep. We've lost Nikki. You there, Nikki?
I am. I'm just.
Yeah, okay. Radio.
Sorry, I'm just doing a dance with the plugs.
So Paul, just back to you, what Nikki's raised about today's dollars as against the present value of receipts in the future.
I guess what we're trying to do here is deal with knowns, and typical. I'm not the CBRE or the commercial advisor here, but typically in a project you would look at NPV and comparing one option versus another.
Yes.
Because the first question I would say is what discount rate would you use? So I can compare A versus B. Under this DA, it's quite well set out. There isn't an alternative option. It's set up the way it is. So I question the advantage in being able to use that, because this discount rate would be kind of a guesswork exercise.
I guess my point is it looks like we have a significant surplus and we're assuming and you know, without any profits which are, you know, at risk, without any super profits. I just feel like we're presenting figures that look quite positive, but that's because of what we're presenting and what we're assuming. And I think it needs to be really clear what numbers we're looking at. If we're not dealing with present value of future sums, then that needs to be very clearly identified. And I think expected income, I mean, there's a whole lot of assumptions in there around your 88 million. I just think we need to be really clear and transparent, because it's obviously for the public as well as us. So I really was a question for the committee around what they think would be appropriate, given the local.
Yes, I think Paul summed it up. It's what we've signed up to in the development agreement. And obviously, if you're present valuing the income, you've got to do that for the costs as well.
But that's reasonably easy, I suppose, because we have done that upfront over a period of, what is it, 3 years? Or so, our works, whereas, so I'm just concerned that it does present as a significant net surplus, whereas actually, in real terms, not so much. So look, if they want to present those numbers as they are, that's fine. I just think we need to make it clear what they are beneath in the notes.
Yep.
So people are not comparing apples with oranges.
Yep. So I'm sure Paul will pick that up.
Thank you.
My only comment on Stuart. My only comment on Nikki's comment is typically with projects like this, you do an economic cost benefit analysis at the start, which goes through with NPV analysis, and what you tend to do is at the end then review it. So you're doing apples with apples, because obviously there's significant benefits that are identified with Lakeview, and typically you review them at the end when it's complete. But I also take the point that as you go through, you know, you want to make sure that you're looking at numbers on the same basis and don't spend surpluses out that aren't surpluses. So I think it's a fair point.
Yep. Thank you, Bill. Any other comments?
Question, please, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. No, thanks, Paul. Appreciate the report. I see we have reached that sunset date end of September. First question is, how confident are you that we will meet end of December for Christmas this year? Last time we spoke, I think we were talking maybe some bonds in place by then. Is that still going to be the case?
It's tidied up a little more, so it's quite clear now. Both the developer and consenting team and the contractor and everyone are a bit more clear around completing that work. Certainly the subdivision works will be completed by then, because it was
and I suppose the discussion that had to take place with the developer on reach that sunset date at no time, or there was no indication that they might be using that sunset date to get out of this agreement?
no whatsoever.
And just a question, I know this was in the agenda last time around, but we sort of spent a fair bit of time talking about standing orders and things during the Lakeview item last meeting. There were some changes that were agreed in June 2023. There was a material change to the number of floors of the building, and there was a couple of minor changes to the number of co-living lots and car parks. Do you know what they changed to, or what the numbers are now? How many floors is that stage one going to be, or what 8 and 7 going to be? Total number of co-living and car parks.
They're listed on page 159. You're on page 159?
Yeah, it doesn't say what they changed to, though. It just says there were changes, a reduction of the number of car parks under the master development plan. Just wondering to how many.
Yeah, no, we haven't reported on that level of detail at this point.
Okay.
I'm
guessing that material change to the number of floors was due to the review through the RMA process. It seems too high.
Correct, yeah.
Do you know where it landed?
It was a material change because it was more than one. I think it was a reduction of, I'm happy to say, 2 to 3 floors in some buildings and 1 in other buildings. Yeah, so there was 4 buildings. One building was 2 floors, 3 floors, and the other buildings were 1 floor each.
So what does that mean? The total floors going to be now?
So if it was a 12-metre floor, 12-storey building, it's now 11. One of the smaller buildings was a bit more. the GFA, net GFA hasn't changed. It's the gross floor area. So they were able to accommodate it within that footprint, within that reduced footprint. And some of that was achieved by a lower floor to floor ratio. So instead of a 4 metre floor to floor, it went down to 3.6.
And it was achieved through the loss of the car parks.
Bring on Christmas.
Reduction, not loss. Yeah, reduction of.
Close to, but yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay. Any further questions, Heath?
No, that's fine for me, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Happy to move.
Okay, thank you. Got a seconder?
Second that.
Okay, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried.
Aye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
And we now move to public excluded. So I'll move that we move into public excluded. Bill, your second?
Yep.
All those
All
in
good.
favour? Carried. Right, next item is the minutes of the 6th of July in the public excluded. I take it that everyone that shouldn't be there is now left.
Yes.